So good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Annalyn Schooley, current chair of the Florida Interest Network, and I am thrilled to be welcoming my colleague, Annette Ryder. Annette and I have known each other for a very, very long time.
Very
long time. And so Annette is in the Tampa Bay area. And how many years have you been in private practice, Annette?
About 25 now.
25.
Yeah.
So you must have started when you were 15, clearly.
5, I think.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. So, so that's great. And so tell us a little about your credentials, where you went to school, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. School. That's fun to talk about. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology from the University of California, San Diego. And then I have a graduate degree that I got a little bit later. I took a break and then I went back to school and I got a graduate degree from University of San Diego in marriage, family, and child counseling back in the day when it was the MFCC, marriage, family, child counseling. And then I moved out here in 98 to Florida and got licensed here. And that's how long I've been practicing here in Florida. And I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I'm also an approved supervisor for MFT and MHC. I have a podcast with a colleague, Monica Burton. A lot of you probably know Monica or have heard of her maybe. So I do a podcast and I have been doing career. So I also have an adult daughter. And I've worked with Dr. Janet Greenwood for years, sending people for her career counseling program. And then eventually her career counseling program got adopted by her son. They made a big algorithm, put it online. And I started doing the Greenwood system, which is the GS 120 career counseling system a while ago, maybe 8 years ago. And I've been offering that through my practice. And so I've been doing that for a while. And so you and I were chatting about it. We thought, well, this would be a good topic because I think all therapists are trying to kind of diversify a little bit or keep their interests up by having more awareness about what's out there. And I think for systemically trained individuals, like most of us probably are here on this, we think about more than just what the symptoms that are presenting in the room are and what they might mean. And when sometimes that might mean that the career someone's in is really a mismatch for the type of person they are, the values they have, their personality traits. And I have no idea why, but a rock just fell. Isn't that weird? Like a rock in the background that just sits on a shelf just fell off. I don't know. Does anybody
see now? My excuse is the cats will push it off, but I don't know. Maybe the spirits are moving in there.
I don't know. Whatever. Right. So there you go. So if that means anything to anybody, there you go. The rock just fell. So that's a little bit about me. So when my daughter took this test when she was 15, I found parenting a difficult task, and I found I didn't always excel at it. And when she took this test, it was the first time I'd actually seen any type of testing that helped explain my daughter to me better.
So this is the Greenwood system we're speaking of?
Right. So then that's where it got me interested in finding out and understanding how, because as a systemic therapist, I thought I knew it all. And I know. And I thought that I would understand, and I didn't really understand how much somebody's passions and their abilities and their intellect and how all that stuff might mix up, and their psychology, right? The whole might mix up differently. I hadn't really as strongly considered understanding someone from a career aspect as a systemic trained therapist, as my eyes flew open, and it made me really look at people differently. Although I had probably noticed in therapy that people were not in the right careers, I just didn't really know what to do with it. And so that's what made me look into this more and change my perspective. And it makes me consider career and what people are doing as a career probably a little bit like Minuchin used to. I think he used to pretty seriously take in what was someone's job and how might them being an architect, how could you use that as a tool to craft your tools or assessment that you would change, how do you help them architect their family different, or how do you help them use their strengths in their career in their family counseling differently? So
Yeah, so often when we would ask about career, it would be in the kind of a metaphoric way of talking about, skills here get translated over here to the family or to the marriage or that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
But you, so it was your daughter taking this. What was the context in which your daughter took this Greenwood assessment that you found out about?
Well, I had one of those kids that is just good at too many things. The classic problematic thing that a lot of people, like these overachiever, too bright kids have. And we just couldn't figure out what she should do or where she should go to college or what she would excel at or what would make sense to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had no good guess on it. And so my, colleague Janet, just her and I talked to, so why don't we just give her the test? And they had just got the algorithm online. So it's an online testing equipment that basically I send to a client and they take the 3 tests. There's 3 tests that are gathered together. They do them online virtually without me there. And then there's an interview process of about 2 hours where I do a lot of values clarifications. And I thought I'd break down some things to think about when you're thinking about working with career counseling with your clients. And then the results come in from the testing equipment. So for me, that was a nice package to buy because I didn't want the burden of like saying these were my test results. The GS 120 provides the test results. So I then go debrief the test results with the students or the adults. I primarily do this test on 15 to 30-year-olds, but there are quite a few people that have been coming a little, it's valid till 75. And then I've had more and more people do it that are like getting a divorce and they have to find a new career after like being an at-home mom or at-home dad for the last 15 years. And I even had one client in their divorce package got this test paid for through the divorce package. So yes, which is not that unusual to have career counseling as part of your divorce package because, it's part of the alimony kind of exchange package. And it's often something that is worked on in mediation for anyone who.
What kind of cost are we, what is the cost to you as the clinician and the cost to the client for this particular tool?
So just because of my own professional privacy, I'd rather not discuss my contract.
Sure.
But the cost the testing it's 4 hours of, sorry, there's a siren going by. I don't know if you guys are hearing that. It's 4 hours of my time. So they get 4 hours of one-on-one time with me and all the testing, and it's $1,500.
Okay.
Yeah. It
Okay.
used to sell for 5,000, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Okay.
that was when someone was manually like pen and paper doing all the Myers-Briggs testing results on their own. And, when we were still back in the dinosaur ages using typewriters and such.
I bet when I was chipping away at Richard and I were chipping away at stone blocks. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's back then.
So let's kind of go back to the beginning here. So you're a marriage and family therapist. You see families, you see couples, you see individuals that are members of families and couples.
Yes.
And so as you're talking to them, what would, short of them coming and saying, I want career counseling, short of them actually, what would prompt you to think about offering this particular type of service?
So I like to think of like the way I think of career counseling as part of just this inventory that I'm taking when I'm meeting with people and understanding what they do and thinking of it more integrated and holistic as part of the person. So I'm trying to see like in the dimensions of wellness, like in their emotional, occupational, physical, social, intellectual, spiritual, how are all those things working out? Like what part is the problem here in their depression or in their anxiety? And sometimes it's obviously a little bit just intuition where somebody's, like in the middle of getting their master's, in education, they hate their job as a teacher and they're planning on continuing to be a teacher, and they kind of don't like kids. And strangely enough, they're good at what they're doing. So this is also the problem. A lot of people are actually good at doing what they hate doing, and they're depressed. So this is, probably not a surprise to a lot of you. I see some nods out there of experienced therapists. So they're good at doing what they hate, right? So they have no passion, but they have tenacity. So they stick with their job, and their parents are proud of them, right? So they dig in their heels and they try harder and they just stick with it. And so the depression doesn't seem linked to any other thing. Like they've not really been a depressed person. When they were in college, they really weren't depressed. When they've had another job, they weren't. So it starts to look like, or just like almost like the person that one time was sitting here going, I think I'm depressed. I think I'm depressed. And they just kept touching their mouth. And I'm like, is something going on with your mouth? And they're like, yeah, I think I have a toothache. And I'm like, I mean, like I just did this whole biological interview about depression, and it never was in a part of their lifestyle. So I sent them to a dentist and asked them to call me if they thought they should get back in. And sure enough, they needed a root canal. Like they weren't depressed, right? Like, so sometimes you're just like, this is not sounding or quacking or smelling like a duck. This is not depression from a typical reason why someone would be depressed, or even giving me any of the symptomology that I would qualify for depression, and yet they're presenting depressed. So that's where they might, from being a client, turn into like, hey, let's talk about careers. Or they start telling me their values, and their values are really like, let's just say this, like very altruistic, very puristic. I mean, this is like, I'm going to make this very, I'm cleaning it all up. But then they're doing something like selling solar panels via a website and gutters at the same time, like in case you need solar panels and gutters on your roof. And not that any of these careers are bad, and it's a really heavy salesman kind of, almost like they're lying to people to get them to buy the package. And they're good at it, right? Again, good at it, but feel like it's not in aligned with their values, and they're feeling very frustrated. So that's another sign where I've seen that people are, they're just not following their morals and values. So they have this really high code of morals and values, and then they have this job that they're kind of lying every day to lots of people and feeling crappy about themselves doing it. And then they come in because they're anxious or depressed for therapy.
What you just described sounds very narrative, right? Looking at how their values and their behavior line up with each other. And when it doesn't line up, the narrative therapist would start looking to externalize the problem, and it might be the job. It
Right.
might be what they're doing for a living. So is finding about, I mean, what do you do for a living? That's in a standard biopsychosocial, right? What additional questions that are a part of just the biopsychosocial part, or is that it until the red flag goes off for you, Annette?
Well, I often ask about what they like about their job and the people they work with. What are some of the favorite parts about their job? I mean, they're working 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week. Most people are these days. And if you're spending 40 to 50 or 60 hours a week hating what you do, it's really hard then to go back to your family, who maybe you love, who is why you're working those long, horrible hours doing what you hate, right? Like they're the motivator that's keeping you earning that income. And so, I mean, you can use a little bit of like Barbara DeAngelis used to say, do people need a vocation? Like, do they need to add a volunteership to their life to make them feel more whole or more valued? Volunteer with their church, volunteer with kids, walk dogs, something with adding a vocation? Or do they really need to look at changing their actual career and doing something different with that time? Because I mean, oftentimes people come in and they just start telling you about their horrible boss. Like, I mean, women have told me for years about their bosses who make crazy sexual advances. Now I have men telling me about the same thing, women talking about like, wow, you look really hung in those jeans. Like it's happening. So it's just So sometimes you're hearing about the workplace environment just
Mm.
sucks and you're hearing how much, but does it suck, or are they able to hold enough agency with it? So these are the things that I think as systemic therapists, we're like honing through in our assessment first 2 or 3 sessions. Does the job itself suck? And if the answer is yes, okay, then that's information. How do they handle things that suck in their life? Are they do things stick to them? Are they resilient, and does stuff slide off them? That can they leave that crappy workplace at the place, or do they carry it with them everywhere they go? Is it seeping into them? And then is it coming out sideways, right? Like, are they arguing with their spouse? Are they drinking too much, right? Or what are their coping mechanisms for handling the stress of a horrible job?
So I can easily see how all of that conversation could be done individually, but might be even more effective with the spouse and children there, or parents there, for them to have a perception on, yeah, it's coming out sideways because this and this and this, through the weekend we see you one way, and then starting Sunday night and Monday night we're seeing this other. So I could see how it would be very tempting to look at this as just an individual kind of assessment or an individual problem. But the fact of the leaking out, even does it fit with your values kinds of questions, I think family members could have a perspective on that could be useful. Am I on the right track?
Absolutely. And sometimes this is done in couples counseling. And sometimes I have the parents with the teenager or the college student, or I have parents logging in as part of a long distance kind of like, hey, can we pop in? Sure, hop in on a session and let's all talk this through a little bit. But I mean, often when it's the individual and if they're married, a lot of my clients are pretty honest communicators about, yeah, my wife's sick of hearing this shit, that kind of stuff. They'll let me know. My wife thinks I should have quit a million years ago. My husband's so tired of me complaining about my boss, so that's why I'm here. And so then I ferret out, like, tell me more about what your husband says, what you say, what would your husband tell? I mean, you can ask for, like, what would your husband tell me if he was here, right? You can ask for a little gestalty, I guess, like, what would they say?
Relational. Those are relational questions. Yeah.
Yeah, you can ask for, and I mean, if they've been married for over 5 years, they're usually pretty good reporters about what their partner would say about it. Plus, their partner's been saying it. They've been hearing it. Like, their whole system, like, my whole family is tired of me complaining about my boss or my job. So then it becomes, is this a person that just picked the wrong career, or is this a person that doesn't know how to kind of persevere in tough situations? And which one should we as a therapist be helping? And that's something you want to think through. Like, is this stuff like, because, listen, every job, I work for myself, and I joke regularly that, I'll put a post up on my Facebook page on the weekends when I'm working. I'm like, oh, my boss is working me this week. And some of my friends don't realize I'm the boss. They don't realize I'm joking. And they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry that she sounds horrible. And I'm like, oh, she's a total bitch. And, but it's me, right? Like, I'm joking. And I'm like, oh, wait, sorry, it's me. Yeah, you have to work you got to work on the weekends sometimes when you work for yourself. Like, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm joking.
So I'm also thinking that like part of we were talking right before about how we were saying here about money in the divorce settlement to help one of the members get a job or figure out what they're going to do, that kind of stuff. And I'm also thinking sort of like in domestic violence or IPV interactions, that they're struggling to leave the job because of a whole raft of things. Does that become part of the assessment as well, of what's keeping them from leaving the job that they hate?
Well, I think what happens yes, that could be. Absolutely. You're right. Right. Like, they have reasons to stay, like, oh, it's easy. It's convenient. I'm used to it. What the testing
it pays the bills. I'm afraid financially, if I do anything else, it'd be too risky.
Mm-hmm. Right. But like all fear, when the fear of staying where you're at gets higher than the fear of trying something new, that's when people start coming to therapy to begin with, right? Talking about this out loud and coming in and trying to see if there's something else. And I think what I like particularly about the testing I do, and if you do any testing, I would encourage you to find a program that does some of this. It not only gives people like, hey, here are your top 100 job families that you'd be most happy in, you'll be most contented, meet your whole profile, but also here's your bottom 50 that you should never do. Like, you're going to be miserable doing this. And strangely enough, what happens when I do the testing on the people that are pretty miserable in their job, the job title that they're in is usually in that bottom 50. And one time it was for the teacher that was getting a master's in education, there were 3 teaching jobs. Like, basically, she shouldn't be a teacher. He really was unhappy being a teacher.
Nat, could I ask you to back up a minute? You mentioned earlier 3 tests. You referenced Myers-Briggs, so I'm assuming that's one piece of this. I'm thinking of Strong or whatever else. What are the other, assuming that Myers-Briggs is one,
Yes.
what are the other 2 pieces of the testing?
Sure. Yeah. So actually it's 3 testing pieces, but in the Greenwood assessment program, they have 6 tests in there. I can give you 3, but the rest are their own algorithm that Dr. Janet Greenwood through Greenwood and Associates developed over 30 years. So I can't give you those pieces of it, but the 3
those
tests
parts are proprietary. I get that.
Yeah, right. Well, I wouldn't even know what they are because they're just the algorithm, right? Like, it's her algorithm that she came up with. So yes, the Myers-Briggs and the indicator part of that test to help kind of see what would work best for their work profile. And then also the Hollander. I mean, if you guys understand the Holland test, that's a really good vocation test. And it really helps people see the top 3 pieces from the Holland and understanding the Holland codes. If you haven't studied those yet, it's worth, and these are actually Myers-Briggs indicator and Holland tests are things people can download themselves. You don't need to have any special tools for that. I mean, a public member could go and download this. And then for our testing purposes that I do, we do a thorough 2-hour interview of values, assessment, personal and career values, morals. So we really pull that holistic approach into that 2-hour interview. And that's used once we get the final test results to kind of filter over those test results to go through. But we also put in there the grit test, which I think may be just one of the most powerful indicators of understanding what's going on with people. So
I'm sorry, that was the BRIT, B-R-I-T?
The grit, G-R-I-T. And it's,
Grit.
if you haven't heard of grit, Angela Duckworth, it's Duckworth. Please feel free to watch her TED Talk. She's a pretty amazing person. She's also a person who did a lot of jobs she didn't like doing and finally went back and got a PhD in psychology and developed grit and developed this testing. She started with interviewing cadets at West Point. She interviewed a lot of people to come up with her results and her information. Are people familiar with grit?
She also has a book, and the inventory is in the back of the book.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can do grit, and you can just do grit online too. You wouldn't have to look in it, right? Yeah, the grit book is great to have. But when she was doing this for West Point, what West Point was doing, like finding all these amazing people with all these talents, super brights, all-star athlete, right? These great people. And they would have these cadets come to West Point and they would still get a 30% dropout. And they couldn't figure out why. Why were they getting such a large dropout of these? And, they put a lot in to their candidates. So, I don't know what they estimate, but I think by the time you leave West Point, they've got a couple $100,000 in you. So they don't want to lose 30% in the freshman year. They don't want to make the wrong guess on people. And so what she kind of showed them that IQ and talent don't seem to at all correspond with grittiness. So perseverance of passion is what grittiness tends to measure. And it turns out that people who have passion and have consistency of interest and effort and perseverance and ambition, they tend to do better in the long run. So she calls them like the marathoners versus the sprinters. And in life, if you're gritty, now she, now everybody wants to know, how do you make your kids gritty, right? Like all these parents out there that want to have these perfect kids, right? So they all want to know, how do I make my kid more gritty? She doesn't have quite the answer of that. She likes Dr. Dweck's stuff out of Stanford on the growth mindset, and how to envision long-term and not be afraid of failure. She says gritty people aren't afraid of failure. They see failure as just something that a learning opportunity, and they move forward from that. So they're highly gritty. Her gritty scale is 1 to 5, I think. And so when I see a client who's got a 4 or above as a grit scale, I know that they probably can stick with jobs they hate, but they probably shouldn't, because they could really use that passion. And she has I think a high grit cell, but she was always bopping all around until she finally decided to choose doing what she loved.
So I can hear that a lot of the places that these tools are drawn from tend to be thought of in a individual, people either have grit or don't, or have some level of grit. But as systemic family therapists, we understand how grit or perseverance of passion is incubated in the family, right?
Right.
It's a part of how the family nurtures that sort of thing. So to what extent does that kind of stuff come out in your assessments?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question you just asked, but
Okay.
I think what it's done for me is it's changed me as a counselor by studying this testing and understanding this testing models. I think I deal with parenting very differently now with parents. I think I'm more likely to help parents get grittier and be grittier and think grittier, and trying to decrease this helicopter lawnmower notion of parenting, and think of life as a longer journey, and parenting the 30-year-old, not just the kid that's in front of you. Think of like what's more important here that they're learning, versus just getting lost in this small detail of, did they get an A? Did they get good grades? Are they responsible? Can they handle failure? Can they handle adversity? Can they handle a sucky t-shirt? Should you jump in and defend a 15-year-old against a teacher at their high school, or should you let them kind of fight it out? What are the lessons? What strengths? What emotional muscles would you like them to build, and to prepare for life? And so I think it's changed a lot about the way I focus on parenting, although maybe not as much as I'd like to think it did. I don't know. That could be just me romanticizing myself.
And
Can I ask a question, Adeline? Oh,
Yes, of course, Debbie, and then Richard.
all right. So I'm formulating this as I ask it. I'm building the plane as I fly. But I would love to be a fly on the wall in your room and ask this and find this out. So earlier you mentioned suggesting the career, the better person fit career as perhaps a hobby, volunteerism, something like that. Have you found your clients to see this as a consolation prize of sorts? Are they open to it? Have you had family give feedback on what they think about that suggestion? And if they think as a family that's going to work well for them as a system. Also, what about those students? Because the school system, of course, it being its own system, and depending on who you are, school to prison pipeline, what do we do with the student who has a greater sense of what they want to do and need to do, but the system requires that they matriculate a certain way? And I'm asking this from my boarding school counselors. We're sitting with students who don't have a choice but to go along the conveyor belt, right? And pick,
Mhm.
you may not eat from this tree or that tree, but only this tree. Or you can eat from all these trees except that tree, but that tree is the one you want. How do you help them make sense of being stuck in a system that does not support what's the best fit for them?
Mhm. Well, I think that's also right, some perseverance. So I know I'm not going to remember all your question. So I'm answering the last.
Well, so let me, the part I was fascinated and please tell us again, the person who talked about, does this person need an avocation or a change in vocation? Who was that person again? You told us, Annette.
Barbara DeAngelis. Do you remember her? She was
DeAngelis.
Yeah, she wrote about 30 different books. She's older. She's been around forever. She was the psychologist who was married to the guy who wrote Mars Venus book.
Oh, that's interesting. All right.
Yeah,
Did not have that connection.
Yeah,
okay.
he in the divorce kind of stole some of her ideas. It was a big problem. Pretty funny. Yeah, I like gossip. I like therapists gossip, guys.
Yeah, the behind the scenes family stuff, you bet, in the profession. So DeAngelis talked about assessing for whether someone needs an avocation as opposed to.
Well, I may have said that wrong. I hope I didn't say avocation. She said that sometimes you can't pick what you do, right? Like, so let's say you have a job and you make $200,000 a year and your family is dependent on you making $200,000 a year, but you hate being an accountant, but that's what that job pays and it helps support your family and you own a home and you have kids and you can't change that. So she would advocate, and I agree with this, like, so what would give your life purpose? Would being a football coach on the weekends help you? Would being a dance instructor on the weekends help you? What would make you feel? And that way, when you go to parties, like, why don't you go do that? Why don't you like volunteer and be a basketball coach? And when you go somewhere and people ask you, what do? You can say, I'm a basketball coach, but I also work as an accountant Monday through Friday to help me pay for being a basketball coach. Like, change how you see yourself. I'm a pastor, I'm a minister at my church, right? But I also work as an accountant Monday through Friday to pay for me being a minister, so she would say, like, maybe sometimes it's a little bit about how you frame it, right? She would healthy reframe, right? And
right, so this is so that thank you for clarifying that really helped. So Debbie, did that make more sense too from what she said earlier?
Absolutely. The reframing makes sense. You're doing what you have to do so you can do what you want to do.
Right. And maybe when they don't have, 5 kids in college and they don't have to support this giant house, then they can stop being an accountant and be a full-time something else.
Right.
So yeah. Okay. So
Right.
that kind of that difference. Okay. And then Debbie, you were talking about again some of the have to, right? So we're talking about, are we talking mostly high school or college students, Debbie, when you're thinking of that?
I'm thinking in the K-12 system. So we're looking
K-12,
at
okay.
High schoolers mostly, but the way the system works now, and I don't know how many of you are aware of this, the acceleration process begins so early. So we have
kindergartners are coming home with homework.
Exactly.
Yeah, crazy stuff like that. Yeah.
So it sets the tone for constant acceleration, constantly doing things above and beyond your developmental level. And not necessarily doing what you like, but being stressed out doing it and doing something very hard. And I'm trying to work on something that addresses that, but I want school counseling students to hear, how do they in their own offices address this, what I'm going to call a dilemma within the school system.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost the same thing, right? Like a little bit, like it's very parallel to what we were just talking about, a vocation. Like, there are hoops you'll have to jump through in life. And certainly K through 12 is a lot of hoops. I have all sorts of issues with the educational delivery system model that we have in this country, but we don't have time in the next 20 minutes to cover it. And I'm sure, Debbie, you got your own blast of opinions on that too, and I'm sure we agree on a lot of stuff. So it's a balance of, like, and sometimes even reaching to the kids, like, what's your whole goal, how to keep yourself motivated on the journey of life, of doing the hoops that you have to jump through. I just thank God I went to undergraduate when I was young, because at least like I could party, right? And screw around and goof off, because the hoops you have to get through to jump through to go through undergraduate programs are so boring for adults. Like if you're not 18 to 23, I don't know how you'd get through that. It's just super boring and kind of stupid. And I say that because my husband has decided in the pandemic to go back to college, and he needed to do some undergraduate coursework, and he's had to take some classes, and he's so infuriated and frustrated as a grown man, having worked in the real world, at how ding dongy the systems are, and how ridiculous it is. But it is the hoop that you have to jump through. And I think we have to find ways to also persevere in life, because as an adult, there's a whole lot of stuff I do, right? And this helps, I think, if you think about this with kids and you think about this with parents, there's a whole lot of stuff I have to do as an adult that I absolutely don't want to do. Like the first one is clean toilets. I hate doing that, and I have to do that because I want clean toilets. And I can't always afford a cleaning lady to do it. So sometimes the perseverance of how do you like just look at this as a hoop? How do you put a checkbox? How do you not like make it your badge of honor? How do you find a way to reframe that? And I think as maybe using a little narrative as systemic therapists, I think we have a lot of ways that we can help people see that differently. And listen, I got teenagers in my office all the time. I hate my parents. They suck. I'm never going to talk to them when I grow up. And I'm like, that you might have the worst parents on the planet. It could be somebody's got to have them. It could be you that got them. Right. And by the way, also your parents may choose to not talk to you once you become an adult. Like, just so you know, turnaround's fair. You might also become the type of person they don't want to talk to as an adult person. You just don't know. That'll be determined as you age. And but either way, with these sucky parents, you have to grow up, because it will inevitably be your life, and you will reap the rewards, right, and pay the price for all your choices. And you can have a long blame list for your parents, and you might be right, because they may suck, but still I'll advise you to do that less and succeed more, right? I mean,
So I'm hearing you say it's like the accountant who wants to be, who goes to be the weekend football coach, that the student has to grit through what is tough for them in order to have the right to go play in the rock band or go do the gymnastics or go do the whatever. And it's the smart parents who figure that out, or even better, the smart teachers who figure out how to teach math through gymnastics, or how to teach science through the rock band, or whatever it is.
And how to help students find those gem teachers out there, and then try to, take away, there's just idiot teachers. There's a teacher, a high school English teacher here in St. Pete that just sucks. She's, the classic lemon. I know her name. I'm not going to say it. And she just sucks. And when a kid gets her, I'm like, oh my gosh, get your mom or dad to write emails to the school counselor, get transferred out of that class if you can. Like, it's never going to get better. It's never going to get better. I don't know, she's the lemon law. She made it through. She just sticks. Like, and sometimes the parent's able to get them into a different class. And this is where I'll allow a parent to over advocate and make changes. But, there's a lot of just perseverance. I'm so disappointed in our educational system. There's so much that could be improved. I hope I answered your question, Debbie.
I think so. I think, I don't know if one of my students have any spin-offs of that question, because I know it's something they've asked about. What does that reframing, one just texted me, what does that reframing look like for a high school student? Here you are, you're about to launch out. You think you're on the wrong path.
Mm-hmm. So like they have a plan, and the plan isn't what they want to do. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Taj, you want to chime in? And
yeah, get the case. Let's do the case. If you don't mind, Taj.
Taj, you're breaking up really bad.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Debbie, do you understand?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Oh wait, so you guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, now better. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. There's not really like a case per se. I just wonder what reframing would look like for a high school student. I guess like someone who's about to graduate, not really sure of what they want to do. They do the career test. Maybe they don't have the grades to go to college, or so yeah, I don't know. I just kind of wonder like what that would look like for a high school student.
Well, I mean, I guess I would look at their support systems, like what do they have in place to help them? First of all, college isn't everything. I'm not a big pro college person. I know there's a lot of other ways to make a lot of money and support yourself and be happy. So, and I also know that the brain continues to develop, and what you aren't good in your senior year, you might very well be a whole lot better at when you're 22 and 23, when your prefrontal cortex kicks in a lot better. I mean, by the way, I failed math and basically didn't take the stupid one calculus course that I needed to graduate college until I was a senior. And then it was easy peasy and I got an A. And talk about, this is before we knew about prefrontal cortex development. Nobody knew anything about the brain. So, but now that I understand about the brain and prefrontal cortex development, I look back and go, oh, it must have kicked in. That's why I could look at things more logically and more reasonably and more mathematically, and I could do math. So sometimes I tell people that story, like as you age, you will get better and understand things and your grades will improve. I mean, maybe there's a way they could get into taking some evening classes at a local JC or local college while they're working, and maybe a career they're interested in, or a career that helps them pay the bills, buy food and stuff like that in the meantime. How to give them hope. I think that's part of I think the biggest thing we can help young people is how to have hope for the future, how to believe in themselves, and how to, I was laughing at Anne Ellen's cat.
Yes, my dog very consistently can't decide which side of the screen to be on.
I understand. So I hope that helps. As much as I can find ways to help young people get hope, and also just not believe that you need to have all the answers, that life unfolds. I have a sense of a belief in my own personal life, in the divine, whatever you want to call that, God, the universe, more in this world. And I'm comfortable with talking about let's just see what unfolds a little bit and then take it from the next step. Most of us in our careers did not get here. I mean, I worked in marketing and retail. I was a manager of Gucci. I sold fur coats. I did all sorts of things that before I became a counselor. I was a marketing of a mall management marketing company. And then I decided through my church to get involved with counseling. And the next thing I know, I'm going to grad school. And honestly, I had to break my foot to find time to study for the test to get into grad school. So, life unfolded and I ended up here. And most adults that have any career didn't just go on an arrow straight path to something. It's rather curvy and rigid. And I think when you're young, that's so scary because you want this perfect little answer and you want someone to wrap it up with a bow and a package and you're going to be this and it'll be great. And actually, that's the funnest part about being young, is it's all undecided. For me at 55, this is it. This is what I'm doing. It would be really hard to redirect this boat at this point. Maybe I'll write a book or something, but another one. But I'm not undoing. I've gotten there, but getting here was really windy and curvy. And that's the cool part. The cool part of the beginning of a relationship, right? You don't know that person. You don't know, is it going to work out? You don't know if they're trustworthy, but you're excited and they're sexy and they're hot and you're into them, but you're not really sure. Is this the one? Are you the one? Is this going to work out? There's only one time for your big relationship that you finally get. There's only one time that you go through that for the last time. And you don't want to miss out because you're so afraid it won't work out that you don't try to enjoy it too along the way. That uncertainty, that naivete, that's the last time you'll have that morsel. I try to tell young couples this, you're talking about having a baby pretty soon. This is the last time it's just going to be the two of you. You want to go somewhere, you want to do something, don't just jump in the station wagon yet.
So I'm hearing you saying that a lot of the message that we can give, say, middle school and high school kids, is the understanding that there's this dominant discourse that the minute you leave high school, you should know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I don't know where that I don't know where that dominant discourse came from. I guess it's probably classic American, pull yourself up your bootstraps kind of mentality. But I remember hearing at one point that that on average, adults go through 3 careers in their lifetime. And so high school is not the first one. High school is just school. It's not even a career. I listened to a podcast with Mike Rowe, and he's the guy, the Dirty Jobs guy, and he has $1 million to give away every year to folks out of high school who want to go into the trades. And they talk about welders who make 6 figures. And I keep thinking, I don't make 6 figures yet. Am I in the wrong career? Should I go learn to be a welder? So I think that that there's a lot of dominant discourses. We have an overlay of narrative therapy here tonight. A lot of dominant discourses about the shoulds and oughts of career and what you should be in your life. And honestly, people might go to the restaurant and think, oh, the poor server, what aren't they, when are they going to, have their real life? But it takes really hard work to be a good server. It takes really hard work to be a good bus boy or a table cleaner. That every job that is done is an important job. And I think we fail to value all these different kinds of work and only think that there's certain kinds of work that are truly valuable and truly honorable. And I think all work is valuable. And that's the dominant discourse that we might be fighting. And that's why we need to see the families. Because what is the family story about work? What is the family story about education? To see what that young person is being fed about what the expectations of their life. Debbie, am I any closer? Is that
Oh, absolutely. I was just trying to be their voice. And that dominant discourse you're talking about, a lot of times it comes through culture. Like whenever today I had a meeting with a student who is of Indian descent, and her family is not, let's say, best pleased that she chose counseling, oncology, engineering, something that we can brag about.
Dr. Laura Architect. Yep.
Exactly. And it's I see this with my Nigerian families, West Indian families. It's just one of those things where we've gone through the struggle. So you can come here and be one of these very sexy, professionals. So I get it. And that's a part of the dominant discourse, and that's a part of how that works in the family system. You make us proud, the group efficacy. You make us proud. We need to be able to boast about you. You're not giving us something to boast about. And that's a part of what some high schoolers experience. And as they get closer to graduation, the weight of it hits them even more, that they're really not about to do what they want to do, or they don't even know what they really want because they've been fed all this and it doesn't resonate. But they haven't given a chance to figure out or flesh out what they do like. And that's a part of where that dissonance comes in.
They haven't tasted enough things, right? How do you know what you like if you don't get a chance to taste a bunch of things and find out, I don't ever want to have that, but I'll have a lot more of that. Didn't even know that existed. Sure. Yeah.
Well, and I think I see in the discussion that people are putting up like titles and jobs and professions, like there's status with this, but by the way, I see a lot of doctors and lawyers in my private practice. It makes up a great deal of my private practice, and they're not all happy being doctors and lawyers. So if the title actually made people happy, like if money could buy health and time, then I'd all be about, let's get money. But it turns out it doesn't buy health and time. And health and time are unbuyable. And quality is also unbuyable, right? Quantity I mean, so you've got to figure out what your values are. And to some degree, what I see young people doing with their parents more and more, even the immigrant families. I'm an immigrant family, by the way. My parents thought it was a really waste of time that I went to college, and they definitely thought grad school was a total waste of time. They made no sense to them whatsoever. But again, I think I'm kind of a gritty person, and it just made sense that I do it. And so they just had to deal with it. Like, and part of it is they're like barely, high school graduates and make a lot of money. They do well. So they would have liked me to just take on some of the family stuff and make a lot of money. I probably could have made more money doing that, but I wouldn't have been happy. So I didn't do it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well-
think that sometimes, and by the way, sometimes parents start experiencing this, right? They start having their own friends and family dying of cancer and things like that. And they start realizing, like, you're right, you can't buy time. And I don't want my kid, I didn't raise them. Like, truly, when you get down to it, they didn't raise them to just give them some title. They raised them to be whole, and they love them. They love them more than life itself. And they do want them, but they've gotten it confused. They thought like being a doctor would make them better. Like, that's what that goal is, that somehow that would make them better
Mm.
and protect them.
I
And
could
it-
really see doing genogram work in this same kind of context, at looking at work across the generations and what work meant. And if, if an immigrant family come in and they were a peddler, and then the next generation was the merchant, and then the next generation was the doctor lawyer, and then how the weight of the culture, the family's culture, all of that kind of stuff, travels down to that doctor's kid. And that's the kid that wants to be the poet, right? And of course, that family 3 generations back came to this country in order to have the freedom for that great grandchild to be a poet. That's what freedom in the United States is about. But yeah, so I love that
the
idea.
story of the poet, the current poet laureate, that Amanda Gorman, that's almost her
Right.
story, by the way. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're not
So-
far from her story there. Yeah, like that's
Yeah,
actually,
well, and I
was
couldn't think of her
also-
name, but yeah, look at, if your kid wants to be a poet, let's use her as the example. So of see what one can do as a poet. So yeah, I love it. I love
Right.
it.
Well, and that was also what the privilege you were hoping to buy into, right? By coming to this level of freedoms and stuff. And I mean, my parents are proud of me, don't get me wrong. I mean, a couple of them passed on now, but they still, all of them don't know what I do. They don't know, no one in my family has ever been to counseling. So they have no idea what I do. They just think I talk to crazy people. I guess all you guys are crazy tonight, in case
Yeah.
I'm talking
Well,
to you.
you have to be a little crazy to want to hear other people's crazy stuff, right? But there you have it. So.
Yeah.
Well, so we just have another couple of minutes. I would love to hear from some of you about kind of what are you taking from this? What did you find useful? How, what are you curious enough to go find out more about? How is this impacted? I got people on camera, so I'm going to start calling if you don't speak up.
Well, I'll speak up, Dr. Scully, because I'm
Good,
not shy.
Danielle. You're going to be my first call if you didn't.
Hi, Annette. It was so awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, sure. Good seeing you.
I related with everything that you said from the very beginning. And I was just sitting here like, because I'm a career changer in my mid-30s. I spent the first 2 decades of my working life, or 15 years as a marketing director. I was a copywriter, but just like you, I've collected careers over the years. I've sold insurance. I've done telemarketing for MCI. I worked in a grocery store. I did wine club parties. Like, I've done all kinds of random stuff through the years. So I know what I don't want to do at this point. And I also related to what you were saying about, doing something that's meaningful to you. I always thought marketing was going to be so great. I got to be creative, and I like the pace of the work and the variety of every day. It's different. But I realized over time, I was just kind of like creating marginally interesting and questionably accurate ads to make somebody else wealthy. And I didn't feel that great about that anymore.
Mhm.
And that really fueled change for me. So I can understand how people can come in and sit with you and start unpacking all the things that they think are wrong, because we just spend so many hours of our life focused on work that it's a big driver to, success and failure in personal life too.
I love what you said, because it's as a young person, we often don't know what our values are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's only as we do it for a while and we begin to question it, something doesn't feel right. So I really love that story, Danielle. Thanks.
Mhm.
Thanks.
There's a new thing called the Echo Career right now in career counseling, which is people like over 50 looking for a more ecological career because of the pandemic. This has really come about because of the pandemic, that people really want to do things that are environmentally sound. They sat around and watched a lot of YouTube videos, I guess, and want to do something different. And I think it's about having passion and purpose. So Richard, I feel like we lost one of your questions, and maybe I'm wrong. Did we?
I just wanted to
Okay.
come back to something Anna Lynn raised, which has to do with family dynamics. I did some work with the military earlier, and the current generation would be given a timeout card when a drill sergeant yelled at them too frequently. And the older generation would, make jokes about the hypersensitivity of the younger generation. And if you think of the parents of that younger generation, the helicopter parents who rushed to the school system and said, "Teacher, you're a bad teacher. You yelled at my kid," or whatever it is, kind of thing. Or the narcissistic kid who got a lot of praise and everybody got a trophy, kind of thing, and a lot of affirmation. And then the workplace chewed them out because something wasn't done on time, or there were errors in the report the kid, generated or whatever. So, which really, sort of then comes back to grit and recognizing that your sort of hypersensitive self is probably going to get chewed up in a lot of environments.
Mhm.
When you move from a set of testing that gets the person within these parameters and says, stay away from these, is a piece of that also recognizing the grit element required to survive in the ones that come up on the top, and create enough clarity for the ones on the bottom to say, stay out of these, because if you were raised with helicopter parents and overprotective and all that, you're going to fail in these 5 careers. Give me a sense of how you sort of handle and think about that grit dynamic and how that interfaces with these 5 careers versus these 5 careers. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I could come up with 5 careers off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but
no, but you get
Yeah.
the general idea.
From the
I get-
based on the test, the
Yeah,
top 5. Yeah.
yeah, if you really need a 4+ if you're going to be looking at master's, PhD, doctorate level schooling of any kind, right? I mean, it's just probably, maybe someone with a 3 could pull it off, but they probably won't complete it. They'll probably stop. And that's just how that will go. So you really want to look at a higher. So when in our testing, they'll give a job family, and at the top of that, they might have what the doctors or PhD levels jobs would be. And then at the bottom of it, they might have the associates levels, or just high school degree. And so that's where, depending on how high the grit is, I might look at those jobs and focus more when we're looking at, because I usually try to wrap up the test at the end of it. When we're done going over it, we are going to give them and I are going to agree on 5 jobs they're going to look into. And I'm probably going to look more towards that lower end if they have the lower grit score, and towards the higher end. Now, if they're younger, I do think I wonder sometimes, can grit be developed? We don't know enough about grit. So I just challenge them on their grit scores. Like, do you think you'll have the tenacity for this? Do you see yourself as doing this differently? my grit score increased by moving out of my home because my family had different values about studying. They really thought I should do more housework and things like that. I'm not trying to put my family down. Don't hear that. You don't have to have sympathy for me, but I'm just saying they had values about what I should be doing. And so I really wasn't allowed to explore my intelligence until I left the family. So I think I had a pretty low academic grit score. But once I got to college, I really enjoyed challenging myself and my intelligence. And I was interested in doing it. And I lived at a time that was possible. So that's where I would try to lean in, and I would, like which one strikes you? Which one do you have passion? If we're looking at this, you want to be water management, or do you want to be like, do you want to do tech, environment? Like, what are you thinking? And they're like, wow, I really like animals. Okay, like let's go over to the animal department. And then we're like, where does the passion lead them? Because it's so much easier to let your passion drive you, than it is to just let your ability to hard work, right? Like if you have to work at a job you hate, you'll be really stressed out. And if you get to do what you have passion for, it's an easy day if you work 16 hours.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we could talk about this some more, as is so often the case. And so it would be great, Annette, to have you come back sometime and talk more about, after the testing and then what do you do with that? And then how do you weave the family back into that whole part of the process? That would be really, really great to have. But I want to respect that people are wanting dinner and things like that. So thank you everyone for coming. I hope you got something enjoyable out of this. I just want you to be looking at the Fin Facebook for the upcoming events. We have many events coming up, so take a look at those. And if you're not already an AAMFT member, or if you're not following the Florida Interest Network Facebook site, I hope that you will do that. And Annette has put in there stpetersburgtherapy.com as a way to contact her and to see what she's doing. So I wish you all a terrific night, and thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you
Schooley.
guys.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can email me at stpetersburgtherapy@gmail.com, or you can just go to that website and find all my information. And if you have any questions that I didn't answer, I can be slow, but I will get back to you, I promise. So send me an email.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Annette.
Dr. Schooley, I have a question.
Yes.